friends, and welcome back to whatever this is if you're not new here. But if you are new here, I'm Priscilla and I'm from Pretty and Paint. I'm here to show y'all a little tutorial on how to do a thrifter pouch. That's what I've been calling them. So you'll be learning how to make this. It is a granny square pouch. This one's just a rectangle. This is the one we will be doing together, and it does have a liner inside with a zipper. Wow. And I wanted to just do a quick little intro before we hop on into the tutorial. So if you want to skip this, you can totally skip this, but I figured I give like a list of materials here somewhere on the screen. I will put that here. If you want to pause and screenshot it, totally do that. See if what you have, what you don't have, if you need to grab some stuff or whatever. And also I wanted to mention that gauge is not important in this pattern. So if you are new to crocheting, or if you have like a favorite hook or a favorite fiber that you like to use, just grab whatever you got. I do have an acrylic and a cotton. I just brain farted. I do make it in cotton and acrylic, and so doesn't matter which one, to be quite frank. So when you put the liner in, it kind of helps the pouch stay put. It won't stretch or do anything funky. So use whatever you got. I also wanted to mention I do have this pattern available on my Etsy and Ravelry shop. So if you do want a PDF copy of this pattern, you can totally grab one. This tutorial is just going to be learning how to do the rectangle one with the palm border. The PDF file has the square option, and also has, I just dropped it, has the square option as well. And then it also has a, let me see if I can find it, another border option. So if you are not in the boho palm mood and you want something just a little bit more subtle, I do have these picot, whatever you want to call it, border option. I will throw out here as well that you can make it this with any square. So if you want to make, like, for example, like a scrappy square, you can use a scrappy square. This is just a square that I use for my cardigans, so I had a couple extras and I was like, I want to try it. So I did, but the only thing was I did have to put some fabric glue on the corners. That way the liner did not pop out. It was quite holy. So, but super cute. You can make it with whichever square you desire. It does not matter. This is just the one that I had written down in the pattern and also going to do the tutorial for. So if you want to follow along, that's awesome. Also, I want to say is if you are afraid of sewing, don't be. I am not a perfect sewer. I will never be, I don't think. I don't know how to cut in straight line. I don't know how to sew in straight line. So I would totally bust out that sewing machine if you have one, and just try it out. It's honestly not too bad. I do have a separate video explaining how to make the liner for the pouch. So once you're through with this tutorial, just head on over there. And also, I want to preface that I am not a slow crocheter, so I do tend to crochet pretty quickly, and I will do my best to explain things as I go through the tutorial. But if you feel like you need to slow down the video by any means, there is a settings button somewhere on the screen that you can kind of slow it down while you're watching me do some stitches. So if that happens, but yes, I'm so excited to do this, and I typically don't upload consistently on YouTube, but I'm trying. So if you want some more like free patterns and that kind of stuff, tutorials, whatever, leave a comment below and I can totally look over those and see what I can do. I'm a mom to a 2-year-old and she is sassy. So I do this during nap time. So yay! All right, anyway, we're gonna hop on into it, so I'll see you there. Bye. Hello. All right, let's jump on in. So I'm going to show you how to make the rectangle thrifter granny pouch with the palm border. And The liner tutorial is on this series, so once we are finished with the pouch, then you can head on over to that video to learn how to make the liner. This is what the liner looks like. It is double lined, so it makes it nice and easy for things to not to fall out, and the zipper is nice and hidden within the fabric. But yes, this will be on a separate video, and this video we're just going to teach you how to make the rectangle thrifter pouch. So like I had mentioned in the beginning, that there is a written pattern. The written pattern has the square option. So if you want a square instead of a rectangle, it also has the option for the picot border for any of the pouches. So you can decide what you want to do, but for this video, we're going just to show you this one. I'm going to end up using some cotton yarn that I have just laying around, and I do recommend a weight 4. I do have a couple of these like scrap skeins that I've used like partially, so I'm just gonna put them over here on the side before we start. And what I use for these pouches is a 4.5mm crochet hook. You can use whatever hook you prefer or like. If you have a favorite, the gauge is not important. So 4.5mm crochet hook is what I use. You'll need a pair of scissors and a tapestry needle or darning needle, whatever you call these things. I just call it a needle. So the pouch will end up measuring, if you end up using a 4.5mm hook and have somewhat of a loose tension. I do have a pretty loose tension, so including the border, the pouch will be about 9 inches wide, and then it will be 6.5 to 7-ish. It's probably 6.5 or 6 3/4 inch tall. So that's how big my pouch turns out. I also wanted to show y'all that you can make the pouch in a different square if you prefer. This one is a modified sunburst granny square. Ooh, sorry, I kicked my tripod. This is one of my scrappy squares from my scrappy cardigan. I just had some extras, so I had quite a few actually. So I ended up making a pouch with this one. This one measures quite a little bit bigger than my normal granny square, but I thought it was super cute. I did have to glue the edges down to adhere the fabric down, so there's that. So if you prefer to do a different square style, you totally can, but we're gonna just jump on in. I may need to see my notes, so watch me like reach over here to my computer and turn that on so I can see. All right, so I'm gonna start with the center color, so the color that's going in the center here. And we're gonna start with a chain 10. So we're gonna chain 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you hear paws in the background, that is my dog just wandering around. So we're going to skip 3 chains from the hook, and these 3 chains equal as a double crochet. So we're gonna double crochet into the 4th chain here, and we're gonna put 2 in there. And this is what's gonna be what's called a cluster, a granny cluster. So you should have 3 double crochets. That first chain 3 counts as a double crochet here and throughout, unless I state otherwise. We're going to skip, I believe it's 1, but let me just make sure. I think it's 2. So we're gonna skip 2, 1, 2, and then we're gonna put a granny cluster into this 3rd chain. So a granny cluster is 3 double crochets in the same space. Ooh. And then we're gonna skip 2 again, and in this last chain, we're going to put a 3 granny clusters, but with it, but we're gonna separate each granny cluster with a chain 2. So 1 granny cluster, chain 2, another granny cluster, chain 2, and you'll see that we'll start to rotate a little bit. That is totally fine. and then another granny cluster. And then we just created our first corner edge. So this is what it looks like so far. So you have 1, 2 granny clusters here, and then 3 granny clusters into that last chain with a chain 2 separating the 3 of them. So now we're going to put a granny cluster into the same chain that this granny cluster is. So we're basically skipping 2 chains like we did in the beginning. We're going to put a granny cluster right here. And yes, it'll be in the same little chain space, just like so. And then we're going to skip 2 again, and then we're going to put a granny cluster right into the same spot that this first granny cluster was made, but we're going to chain 2 after this granny cluster. Oh, my yarn is splitting. And put another granny cluster here so we can mimic the other side. Chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of that first double crochet that we have, which is the chain 3. We're just going to slip stitch, but instead of slip stitching and fastening off, I'm going to do a color change slip stitch. So I'm going to grab my second color, and I'm going to snip this first color off just so it's off. And we're going to, instead of slip stitching with the first color that we were using, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch using the second color. So I'm dropping that pink off, and I'm going to put this green through and slip stitch. And if you tug on this pink, the first color that you made, it should tighten it up a bit, and it should look like that. So now we're working with our second color. We're going to go ahead and chain 3. And this equals as our double crochet, like I had stated before. And now we're going to do 2 double crochets into the space behind that slip stitch. So right here in this space right here, we're going to put 2 double crochets so we can create a granny cluster, just like so. And sometimes I'll tug on this end here just to make it tight, and also the pink one just to make it tight. So you'll probably see me doing that. So we're gonna have a granny cluster right into this space right here that was behind the slip stitch. Now we're going to put a granny cluster within these little spaces here, this space and this space. There's like this little gap in between the granny clusters. We're gonna go ahead and put a granny cluster here. And a granny cluster here. Like so. And now into this chain 2 space, we're going to go ahead and put a granny cluster, chain 2, and a granny cluster to create a corner. So a granny cluster, chain 2, and another granny cluster within the same chain 2 space. So now we have our first little corner of the rectangle right here. And we're going to repeat this corner over here into this next chain 2 space. So we're going to do a granny cluster, chain 2, and another granny cluster. So now we created 2 corners. So this is what it looks like so far. And don't mind my little end here, I'll weave that in later. There it goes. And now we're going to put a granny cluster into the space in between these 2 granny clusters. So we're just basically mimicking what we did on the first side. So a granny cluster into this little hole, space, gap, whatever you want to call it, in between the granny clusters. And then another one right over here. And now the chain 2 space is coming up here. So we're gonna put a granny cluster, chain 2, and another granny cluster. My yarn is having some issues coming out of my bowl here, or my cake, whatever you wanna call it. So go ahead and put a granny cluster here. chain 2, and another granny cluster. And now into this last chain 2 space where we have the first granny cluster made here, we're going to go ahead and put a granny cluster and a chain 2 and then slip stitch to the top of that chain 3, which is the first double crochet, to complete the round. So we're going to go ahead and put a granny cluster. My yarn is misbehaving. Chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of that double crochet here. But instead of slip stitching with the same color, I'm going to go ahead and snip this one off, grab my third color. I'll use this blue next, and slip stitch with this color. So I call this a color change slip stitch in the pattern. If you want to not change colors throughout each round, just slip stitch per usual, like with the same color you're using, and go on from there. So we're going to go ahead and chain 3. I'm just going to tug on these little pieces of yarn here, the ends, and we're going to put 2 double crochets into the space behind that slip stitch. So we're basically repeating the same rhythm now, since we have the 4 corners created. So here is my first granny cluster, and we're going to put a granny cluster into this space right next to it, or the gap, the hole, whatever you want to call it. Like so. And then the next one. And then the next one. And now that we made it to our chain 2 space, we're going to create a corner. And the corner is 2 granny clusters with a chain 2 in between them. So right here, we're going to put a granny cluster. We're going to chain 2 and put another granny cluster here. Just like so. Now we're going to put a granny cluster in between these 2 corners. So right here in this gap, we're going to put a granny cluster in there. There you go. And one right here. I will also like to say that within the written pattern, the paid version, there is a modification for how to make the rectangle bigger. So if you would like to know that, you can make the rectangle wider, starting with the wider first color. So that is within the written pattern. But we're in the chain 2 space here. Sorry about that, I just figured I'd let you know. Granny cluster, chain 2, and another granny cluster. Ooh, my yarn kind of split there. All right, now we're on the other side. We're going to put a granny cluster within all these little gaps here, 1, 2, and 3, just like this side, 1, 2, and 3. Like so. And now we're in the chain 2 space. So we're going to create a corner, granny cluster, chain 2, and another granny cluster. And we're going to put a granny cluster right in between these 2 clusters here, just like this side. And then we're going to do another granny cluster right here to finish off this corner. And then we're going to chain 2 after this granny cluster, and we're going to color change slip stitch into the top of this first double crochet, which is the chain 3. So I'm going to snip this yarn off. I'm going to grab a new color. And you may notice that there is a little rhythm going on here. So it's going to be the same thing over and over again for each round. except that we'll be having an extra granny cluster on each side. So now we're at our new color. We're going to chain 3, which is our first double crochet, and we're going to put 2 double crochets into the space behind that slip stitch. So you may notice that this is the same routine as the previous round. So I'm going to put a granny cluster into each one of these spaces, these gaps. And I'm just going to continue around just as I've been doing. If you need to pause this video and go back to see the pattern, like the rhythm of the pattern, you totally can. But it's quite simple to pick up on it because you're just adding clusters within the spaces. And then in the corners, you're going to be putting a granny cluster chained to a granny cluster. So if, for instance, if you wanted to go bigger than this and have more rounds and make it a little wider and a little taller, you would just continue past the 5th round, because I believe this is 5 rounds. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, this is 5 rounds. So if, let's say if you want 7 rounds, you just continue the same rhythm around. So I'm on my 4th color. We have 1 more color left after this round. Just humming along here. So we're just going to put granny cluster into each one of these spaces. So the sides now, instead of having just that 1 in between the corners, we're going to have 2. So whenever you see a hole, like a little gap in between the clusters, you're going to be putting a granny cluster in there. And you'll see as each round goes, you'll just have 1 more on each side. Moving along. It's funny, today is my first time recording with my daughter not sleeping. She went to the gym class with my husband, so her dad, and gave me some time to record this for you guys. So hopefully I have some time to finish it up. I should. Worst case scenario, I'll just give him a text or something and say, hey, take your time to come back so I can finish this up. But yes. I think these pouches are super cute and perfect for like markets, craft shows, and all that stuff. Maybe even like boutiques. If you're one to sell like wholesale, they're so fun to make, and they're actually perfect for like scrap yarn, or if you want to buy colors, like new colors and stuff like that, you can totally do that as well. But I'm just continuing the same motion for this round. So in my corner, I just put the granny cluster chain 2 and a granny cluster, and we're gonna go on to this last side of the pouch. I'm just putting a granny cluster into each one of these spaces. And now I'm here at my final corner stitch. So we're gonna put a granny cluster, and then we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch to the top of this first double crochet, but instead I'm going to color change and snip that off. And I have 1 more color. It's like this nice little pink color, and I'm going to color change, slip stitch, and there you have it. And here we go for the last round. We're chaining 3. And then we're going to put 2 double crochets in that space behind the slip stitch. And we're going to continue on the rhythm. And I think, like I said before, if you want to make this bigger, just continue on. If you're using different colors, just color change, slip stitch, or if you're using the same color, just continue on like so and slip stitch with the same color, and just follow the instructions here. It's quite simple once you get the hang of it. So we're gonna keep putting granny clusters into each one of these spaces, and you'll notice, like I said before, that each side will just have an extra granny cluster. So right here we have 2, 3, and then now we have 4 here, and then this one's gonna be 5. So if you ever like lose track, or if you don't want the written pattern, you basically just follow the rhythm here, and that's how you will make sure that you have a granny cluster into each one of the spaces. All right, so now I'm on my chain 2 space. I'm gonna make a corner. And yes, I do crochet rather quickly. So if I'm going too fast, there is an option to slow down the video on the settings if you need to, but these are just basic double crochet stitches. And the granny cluster is made up of 3. So sometimes I have to work quick if I have all this time to myself to create these tutorials for you guys. Chain 2. So now this is what mine looks like so far. And we're going to continue on putting a granny cluster into each one of these spaces. And these make for some relaxing crochet time for those who are looking for something that is, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll get it. It'll come to my mind. Mindless crochet patterns. I always thought that granny squares were like mindless crochet for me. So if it had a repetitive motion, just like so, it was just like mindless for me to make. So let's say, for instance, I have 2 markets coming up at the end of the year. So I will be batch making a bunch of these rectangles and squares, and I'll just put them in a basket. And then whenever I have enough, I'll assemble them together. So if you're one of those that likes to batch make for events and stuff like that, it's pretty much a perfect pattern. Also good for using up some scraps. So now I'm at my last corner space. I put a granny cluster into this last space with a chain 2, and I'm going to slip stitch to the top of this first double crochet. And since this is my last round, I'm going to go ahead and fasten off, just like so. And now you'll be making 2 of these. So I'm going to make my second one off camera, and I probably will tuck in my ends just a smidge. So this tail, if you weave it through these 3 granny clusters here, it will tighten this up a bit, just like this side. So I will go ahead and do that just so you can see. So typically I'll just take my needle and I'll weave through the stitches. If I can make it through here, I'll weave or put my yarn through the needle. And I'll do it onto the other cluster here. And I will worry about my ends later for the sake of this tutorial. So once I pull through those, I just pull tight, and it should close just like the other one, just like so. So there's not like a weird gap right there, and it just looks uneven. So if this is cotton yarn and this is acrylic yarn, the acrylic yarn looks a little bit more even in my opinion, but I figured I'd use cotton for this tutorial because I had a bunch laying around. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a second one off camera, and then I'll be right back with both to show you how to assemble and put the pom border on the actual pouch. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and I have 2 of the rectangle granny squares or granny rectangles, whatever you want to call them. I just like totally brain farted. Anyway, so now we're just going to go ahead and assemble the 2 and make the actual pouch border. So we're going to go ahead and put the wrong sides together, and don't be like me and totally weave in your ends before this. If you don't want to, that's totally fine too, and you can just I usually just kind of like turn the pouch inside out. Let me, ooh, so sorry. I like touched my tripod. Let me move you again. You can like turn your pouch inside out like so, and then weave them in after you're done. You can totally do that as well. So we're gonna go ahead and grab whatever color you want to use for your border. I end up using this pink color for the border. So we're gonna just line these up, wrong sides facing. I might put this bottom, like slip stitch edge on the bottom where we fastened off. And we're going to attach the yarn onto the left corner through both. And I usually just tie a knot. This is how I like to attach my yarn. Totally judge me if you want. So now I'm gonna just put my hook in here and I'm gonna chain one or slip stitch, whatever you wanna call that. I think that was a slip stitch. I'm sorry, I got super like overstimulated because my husband and daughter are on the way home and I'm like, I gotta finish this. But anyway, so we're gonna go ahead and slip stitch into that left corner through both layers of the pouch. And now we're going to put one single crochet right in there, in that corner space. And now we're going to just line these up and we're going to single crochet into each one of these stitches through both layers all the way down. And then we're gonna put three single crochets into this corner right here. So we're gonna follow these stitches down and just make sure that you're staying even. That way stays symmetrical. And I'm just gonna put a single crochet into each one of these stitches through both layers. Let me see if I'm in the right one. I'm not, see? Just gotta pay attention. I was looking in the viewfinder. And we're just gonna make our way down to that corner. Put 3 single crochets into this chain 2 space through both layers. And now we're going to single crochet all the way down the bottom of the pouch until we get to this chain 2 space, and we're going to put 3 in there. So we're just going to follow the same momentum we just did on that one side. I'm going to try getting through my slip stitch or fasten off around here. Probably going to try tucking this in while I'm at it. There you go. I'll worry about that end later. We're just going to make it all the way down this bottom side. Ooh, I split my yarn there. There it goes. Ooh. Get through that stitch. Now we're going to put 3 single crochets right in here. And now we're up the other side. All right, now that we made it to the top corner, we're going to put 1 single crochet through both layers, just like we did here. And now we're only going to be working through the layer that's closest to us. So try to just work through this chain 2 space, not through both layers. We're going to put 2 single crochets right in here, just through that 1 layer. And then we're going to single crochet across the top, just through 1 layer, and then put 2 single crochets into this chain 2 space through 1 layer. All right, now that I made it to this chain 2 space, I'm going to put 2 single crochets through this 1 layer here, and then we're going to slip stitch into this first single crochet that we made on this side, which is basically the first single crochet that we made. So we're going to slip stitch into that first single crochet that we made, and then we're just going to turn, and now we're going to work onto this square. It is closest to us, and we're going to put 2 single crochets into this chain 2 space through 1 layer only, just like so. And then we're going to single crochet down and then put 2 single crochets into this chain 2 space as well, only through 1 layer only. So we're going to make it our last hoorah on the top. Hoorah. Oh my gosh. Probably should sleep some more. My brain might not be so mushy. And it's only like midday. It's like probably 12 p.m. and my brain is like, ooh. So maybe I should get some brain food. Get a little snack break in here. But I won't do that, I promise. We're gonna finish up this tutorial together and I'll starve. I'm just kidding. Oh my gosh, I make myself laugh a little bit. Okay, so I made it across the top, and we're gonna put 2 single crochets into this chain 2 space, just through that 1 layer. And now we're going to slip stitch into that single crochet that is joining the 2. So not these 2 single crochets here. We're gonna put a slip stitch into this one right here that is connecting the 2. So we're gonna slip stitch. And then now, I kind of just stretch this out a bit. Make it a little even. So yes, we're working on the back side, and that is totally fine. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the pom border together. And this is like a maker's choice. So if you want more poms and them to be a little bit more flamboyant and joyful, you will skip less stitches in between the poms. If you want them closer together, which I think I have one over here that I could show you here, like this one, you could skip more stitches in between. So you see how this one has only about 2 or 3 on this side. This one has 4 on this side. So you can skip less or more single crochets in between your pom stitches. If you want them closer to the pouch, like closer, skip more. If you want them a little bit more frilly, you skip less. So figured I'd let you know that before I dive on in. I'm gonna end up doing the one that skips more stitches. I like them to be a little bit closer to the pouch for this one. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to do a puff stitch into the 3rd chain from the hook right here. A puff stitch is technically like 3 half double crochets together, puff stitch, and then we're going to pull through all those loops, and then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to put a puff stitch into this little eyeball right here. See this little hole right on top of that puff stitch? We're going to put a puff stitch right in there. 1, 2, 3, pull through all of those loops, and now we're going to slip stitch into the base of the first puff stitch that we made. So I'm going to insert my hook into this base. So sometimes I will take this loop here on the side and put my hook all the way through like that. Let me just tighten this up a bit. I'm going to grab my yarn and pull through like a slip stitch, pull tight, and then there is your palm. This is what it looks like. And then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to skip 5 stitches, not including the one where I chained. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to slip stitch into that 6th stitch. So there is 1 palm, and then I'll do it twice more for you to see. So we're going to go ahead and chain 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to puff stitch into the 3rd chain from the hook, so 1, 2, 3, and put a puff stitch. Ooh, my yarn splitted. Put a puff stitch right in there, and I'm going to pull through all my loops, just like so. And I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to put a puff stitch right into that eyeball, like right on the top of the puff stitch. 1, 2, and 3. Pull through. And now we're going to slip stitch onto the base of this first puff stitch. So grab my hook and I basically grab this little buddy and this little buddy. So I'm through the base of the puff stitch. I'm going to pull through like a slip stitch. Sometimes I'll mess with my palm to make sure it's a ball. And then I'll chain 3, 2, and 3. I'm going to skip 5 stitches, not including the one that your chain is on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to slip stitch right there. So there it goes. I have 2 palms, and I'm going to do this one more time so you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to puff stitch right into that 3rd chain from the hook. And then we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. We're going to puff stitch right here into the top. And then we're going to slip stitch into the base. Just like so. Chain 3, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to skip 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then put it right into that 6th stitch. And there you have it. I have 3 palms on this side. Should basically mimic this one right here. Oops, this one. So you'll notice that there is probably like an uneven amount of stitches on the border. So let's say for instance you decide to do what I was doing here, which I was skipping 5 stitches in between my palms. You'll notice at the end you'll have to skip probably 1 or 2 more to make it even. That is totally okay. I do have a tester now that she's saying that she skipped 5 on the sides and then skipped 6 on the bottom, and that seemed to even it out. But you can always play around with it. It does not look uneven. If you look at it like this, you're just skipping that 1 extra buddy over here. And I will say that the pouch will have like kind of like a little weird bump on the sides, which is totally fine. So that's what I'll show you what mine looks like on the other side. So you'll notice that like it kind of has like this little crevice where you started the border and the construction. That is totally okay and totally normal. So when you put your pouch inside, let me see if I have a pouch here. I think this one is a rectangle pouch. So when you put your pouch in, I usually tuck it in onto the sides. You're gonna want to either sew, like hand sew or glue. I use glue now because glue is amazing. So I glue right onto the edge of the liner here, and then I basically clip this in just so it stays put. And you want the edging, so the single crochet, to be kind of like a little bit below the zipper. That way when you're opening and closing the zipper, it's not catching onto this cotton or acrylic, whatever you end up using. And then on the sides, you see how like there's kind of like a little bit of a gaping hole here. Gaping hole. Oh my gosh. Oh man, all right. Oh, I shouldn't use that word. Anyway, so you're gonna just basically squeeze these two pieces together here just to keep it secure and say pretty much secure the pouch in. Sometimes I'll just put some glue right here in this corner and I'll like tug at this part and squeeze, and I'll put like a little clip right there, and then the same for this side. So you'll notice like here, like there is a little cinch here that I did with the glue, and I did it also on this side. So, and then this is how my zipper has like enough clearance with the acrylic, and I did use glue for this. So look how awesome that is. That is glued on. So yeah, kind of cute and kind of fun. So you can go ahead and continue the palm border for the rest of your pouch. I'm not going to finish it right now because my daughter's actually getting home with my husband. So I figured this video could show you how to do the border, and it will look just like this one with the palms separated. If you're looking for more modifications for this pattern, it is written in the PDF form, and you can find a PDF file, and you can find that on my Etsy shop and my Ravelry. So I hope you guys have so much fun making these. These are actually so cute and good scrap busters. They do pretty well at craft shows and markets. These are I actually use one for my crochet hooks. So if you want to make one for yourself, you can fill it up with your crochet hooks and pouch, stitch markers, all that good stuff. I use one personally, so I figured why not make a couple for all of you guys. So here you are, and if you're looking to purchase one, I do have them listed in my Etsy shop. As I make them, I add them. I don't have any made to order options. They're all ready to ship. So thanks so much for coming to this tutorial. I hope you subscribe to my channel. I do have a couple of videos in editing, I guess just to say, in editing for free patterns that are designed by me. So if you want to stick around and hang out, let's hang out. And if you have any questions based on this pattern, just leave it in the comments. I can do my best to answer them. Also, if you want me to slow down in a couple of these stitches, I totally can do that as well and upload it as like a short on my YouTube channel. You just let me know in the comments. But I'm happy you're here, and I'm gonna go and hang out with my daughter and my husband. See ya.